All right, let's jump right into this explainer. We're looking at a real-life political thriller today. The brief, intensely high-stakes rule of Nigeria's very first military head of state, Major General Johnson Aguiyi-Ironsi. We're talking about a man whose 194 days in power absolutely and permanently reshaped the destiny of Africa's most populous nation. He was literally caught right in the crossfire of post-colonial ambition and some seriously deep ethnic divisions.
So, picture this. We're starting right at the absolute climax of the chaos. It's 3 a.m., January 15th, 1966, the middle of the night. Telephones are just ringing off the hook, and the newly independent Nigerian state is violently breaking apart. Try to imagine the sheer existential dread of that morning.
The horrific scale of what went down was completely unprecedented. A group of young, mutinous army majors, most of these guys were just in their 20s and 30s, by the way, launched a highly coordinated, incredibly bloody coup. In a matter of hours, Prime Minister Abubakar Tafawa Balewa was abducted. Regional titans like the Premier of the North, Sir Amadou Bello, and the Premier of the West, Chief Samuel Ladika Akintola, assassinated right in their bedrooms. The entire civilian leadership of the First Republic was just decimated, leaving behind this terrifying, gaping political vacuum. Now here's the crucial part. Major General Aguiyi-Ironsi wasn't some power-hungry dictator looking for a throne. The sources make this abundantly clear. He was completely uninvolved in the plot. Actually, crazy enough, he was on the assassin's target list. But when he realized what was going down, the disciplined soldier in him took over. He actively risked his life, drove straight into the mutiny, roared at rebellious soldiers at checkpoints, and mobilized loyal non-commissioned officers. He essentially broke the coup in Lagos single-handedly. But because he was the most senior officer left standing, he reluctantly inherited a broken, bleeding nation. Part 1. Rise of a General. Let's look at his life before the crisis. His origin story is honestly fascinating. Born in Umunnakwe, the source material shares this beautiful story of him as an inconsolable infant who completely refused to eat. That is, until his 10-year-old sister, Ayama, gave him a drop of water from a wooden spoon. That bond really defined his youth. Later, he was raised in cosmopolitan Kano, where he flawlessly absorbed the Hausa language. And then, in 1942, entirely defying his devoted sister's wishes, he quietly walked into a recruitment office and enlisted as a private in the army. He forged his own path from the absolute bottom of the ranks.
He wasn't just a soldier, though. He was a massive pioneer, pushing boundaries for literally every Nigerian officer who followed him. Just look at this rapid ascent. He was the first Nigerian captain in 1953, personal equerry to Queen Elizabeth II in 1956, the very first Nigerian to attend the super prestigious Camberley Staff College in 1957. Fast forward to 1964, and he's commanding the entire United Nations force in the Congo. And finally, in 1965, he reached the absolute summit, becoming the first indigenous general officer commanding the Nigerian army.
And you know, this specific number right here, 60, perfectly encapsulates his legendary military precision on the global stage.
So, during the Congo crisis, 60 Austrian medical personnel were taken hostage by armed factions. Using this totally improvised makeshift force of clerks, cooks, and drivers, literally because that's all he had, Ironsi executed one of the finest UN peacekeeping operations in history. His strict orders were to not fire unless fired upon. By the end of the day, all 60 Austrians were rescued, not a single hostage life was lost. It earned him the Republic of Austria's highest gold decoration. I mean, he proved his world-class leadership under literal fire.
Part 2. 194 Days of Power. Let's see how he actually governed the nation.
So upon taking power on January 16, 1966, he approached the presidency almost like a Democrat in a military uniform. He dispensed the fractured democratic constitution to establish some semblance of order, but then he formed a supreme military council that was remarkably balanced across all the ethnic regions. We're talking officers from the North, West, East, and minority groups. He genuinely tried to stamp out corruption with ruthless military efficiency, doing his best to clean up the monumental mess left by the politicians.
But all right, here's where the history gets really hotly debated. In May 1966, Ironsi issued Decree 34, famously known as the Unification Decree. The aim was to replace the federal structure with a unitary system to unify the civil service. But, and this is key, it kept the 4 regional boundaries entirely intact. Interestingly, historical records show us that it was actually Decree 14, implemented a year later by his successor Yakubu Gowon, that legally fractured those 4 original regions into 12 separate states.
Regardless of his true intentions to create this unified, efficient civil service under a One Nigeria banner, the political miscalculation of Decree 34 was immense.
You have to remember, the decree arrived in a climate of deep ethnic anxiety and massive mistrust following those January assassinations. Northern leaders viewed it as a direct attempt to centralize power under an Igbo-led government. This perception lit an absolute powder keg, triggering coordinated, violent riots across northern cities. Just like that, the fragile trust was totally gone.
Part 3. The July Counter-Coup, and a very tragic end.
It's July 28, 1966. Ironsi is in Ibadan on this nationwide reconciliation tour, desperately trying to preach peace to traditional rulers. He's being hosted at the government house by the military governor of the Western region, Lieutenant Colonel Adekunle Fajuyi. But while Ironsi is out there speaking of unity, his own army is quietly closing in, surrounding the compound in the dead of night.
When mutinous soldiers, led by Major Theophilus Danjuma, arrived to arrest the head of state, Fajuyi exhibited just unimaginable heroism. He was actually given the chance to step aside. Instead, he chose to die rather than betray the guest in his domain. Talk about exemplifying loyalty and honor at the ultimate cost.
Those final moments, they were brutal, visceral. At 5:30 a.m., they were violently seized. Ironsi's famous stuffed crocodile swagger stick, you know, his lucky talisman from the Congo, was snatched away by a subordinate. Both men had their hands and legs tightly bound with telephone cables. They were thrown into vehicles, driven out to a secluded dirt track, marched into a palm bush, and brutally executed near a shallow stream. The man who gave his entire life to the Nigerian army was in the end ultimately consumed by it.
And you know what makes this historical account so vivid? We only know these chilling specifics because of one single man. Ironsi's ADC, Andrew Nwankwo, was tied up and marched into that exact same bush. But during a split-second distraction caused by another loyal officer, Nwankwo managed this miraculous dive into a ditch hidden by the undergrowth. He somehow survived the gunfire that killed his commanders, living to tell the true, unvarnished story of that morning.
Part 4. A complex legacy. Let's look at the aftermath. His death absolutely did not bring peace. In fact, it resulted in 6 months of eerie official silence about his fate. It opened the floodgates to horrific violence, with an estimated 31,000 Eastern Nigerians massacred in the subsequent unrest. This directly spiraled the nation into a devastating 30-month civil war that cost millions of lives. It actually wasn't until 1993, 27 whole years later, that he was posthumously awarded the Grand Commander of the Federal Republic, or GCFR, finally recognizing his place as a head of state. It really proved that destroying a nation's leadership comes with a catastrophic generational cost.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you to ponder this final thought, straight from the source material. Was Aguiyi-Ironsi a visionary who saw past the deadly tribalism of his era, sacrificing himself for a unified Nigeria? Or was he a tragic, naive soldier undone by his own fatal political miscalculations? How exactly do you measure the legacy of an accidental leader who chose peace in a moment that violently demanded war? It's a profound question about leadership and history for sure. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive.